These police officers are acting as terrorist cells in America.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up out there, YouTube? Today my name is Scott. This is No Names Media, sharing with you some information and news that you may not have heard about. Alright, so out there in Rankin County, I believe that's a state in Mississippi somewhere, I came across this tweet today that said that this brother were at someone's home. 6 officers bust in the door and they began to torture them and then accuse them of being drug dealers and sleeping with white women. So according to the tweet, deputies beat, kicked, tased, waterboarded 2 black men and even shot a man in the mouth, causing him to undergo multiple surgeries and forcing a doctor to remove his tongue out of his mouth. Now, for those of you who are not really familiar with what waterboarding was a big issue back in, I'll say around 2007, 2008 during the height of the Iraq-Afghanistan war. And what would happen was that American soldiers would send people they suspected of being terrorists and working with Al-Qaeda, send them to Guantanamo Bay. That's out there, I believe, along the island of Cuba. It's on the eastern side of Cuba. And so what they would do, you lay an individual down on something flat. You remove their clothes, as you know, not all of them, mainly their shirt and everything. And you lay them flat. You have their hands unable to move, legs unable to move, and so they're laying like on a plank. And you put a towel or some sort of cloth over their face, and you pour water on it. And it's used to simulate drowning. It's a torture technique that many of them would use to get information from these terrorists. The United Nations did a convention and had a hearing on that and said that it was cruel and unusual punishment and it should be outlawed. And so they had to stop waterboarding terrorists because it turned out obviously that the information that they were getting from them was not credible because they were under fear of death. And so they were pretty much willing to say anything to not be waterboarded or simulated drowned. And so what we have is 2 officers, well, no, not 2, honestly, 6 officers who do a supposed drug bust in a home out there in Mississippi, break down the door, terrorize the brothers, tase them, beat them, shot one in the mouth, and he had to get his tongue removed because of that incident. And so what we have, obviously, is police officers openly and brazenly using terrorist torture tactics on American citizens. Now, I'm really curious to see how their story and how these if charges are going to be brought, how this entire thing is going to pan out. It's not new, but the fact that the brother was able to get out of the hospital, that's new. And so he has an attorney. They want charges filed. And they're also obviously going to do a lawsuit because I'm sure this brother has a lot of medical bills. And the fact that he can't use his tongue, I want to know what the system thinks that's worth. Not being able to talk anymore, communicate effectively. So I have some Twitter video from the attorney I'm going to share with you all. He's going to give a detailed explanation and give some insight into exactly what happened on that night.
Mississippi cops torture and shoot Michael Jenkins in the mouth and attempt to murder him while he's handcuffed. Folks, policing continues to get incredibly worse. On January 23rd in Rankin County, Mississippi, without showing a warrant, cops burst into a home. 2 black men lay inside, Brother Michael Jenkins and Brother Terrell. They were falsely accused by the 6 white officers of dating white women and selling drugs, and that wasn't true. The 2 were immediately subdued and handcuffed in the residence. But instead of taking the handcuffed men into immediate custody for their alleged crime, the 6 white cops decided they would hold the men hostage and terrorize them for nearly 2 hours inside the home. While the men were handcuffed and bound, these 6 Rankin County white cops beat the men while they were handcuffed, tased the men repeatedly while they were handcuffed, punched, slapped, and beat the men while they were handcuffed, and incredibly, the white officers used waterboarding tactics in this raid. I'm talking about waterboarding. Waterboarding is when you have a person in your custody and you pour water or liquid all over their faces while they're on their back so that the person you have in custody will believe they will drown and confess something to you. This technique was outlawed by the U.S. military when they illegally used it in Iraq. Then in the course of this torture and physical abuse and humiliation, Rankin County sheriffs were both putting guns to both men's head, threatening to kill them while handcuffed. Then tragedy struck when one of the sheriffs shot Michael Jenkins in the mouth. Yes, the cop shot Michael in his mouth, almost killing him, causing him life-threatening injuries, and Michael is in ICU and had to have his tongue removed from his mouth. Now, Michael and his family are decent folks. Black Lawyers for Justice and myself will be at the...
All right, so as you heard from one of Mr. Jenkins' attorneys, and I apologize, there is another brother who's involved. His name is Eddie Parker. He was earlier in this situation released from the hospital, but because Michael was the one who got shot in the mouth, obviously he had to have a longer stay in the hospital to get that surgery. But as you heard from the lawyer, he mentioned that the police broke into the house, because when you come into someone's house and you don't have a warrant or you don't present a warrant, that's breaking and entering. I don't care what position or what costume you're wearing, that's breaking and entering. So these police officers broke into someone's house. The house did not belong to Michael or his friend Eddie. There was another witness there. I believe it was a female. It doesn't explicitly say. But because that witness didn't mention, or there was no mention of that witness getting any beating or being tortured or harmed, at least not to the extent of these 2 men, that leads me to believe that it could have been a female whose house that they were over. And so with the witness there, she gave testimony and said that the police officers broke into the house. They refused to show a warrant. They accused Michael and his friend Eddie of being drug dealers and sleeping with white women. Throughout the entire process, the police officers took turns using their tasers on the 2 black men in some sort of contest in order to see which taser was the strongest. During that process, they beat them, they waterboarded them, and then at some point during that situation, Michael was shot in the mouth by one of the sheriffs. Now, that if you go into a house and you believe that these men are actually selling drugs, and you find drugs, then the next step is to simply arrest them and get them to the police station. The fact that they did all this without finding drugs means that they had no credible information that these black men were selling anything, and that the motive for their attack on them had to be something else. But it certainly wasn't drugs, because in the article there seems to be no mention of drugs. Now, give me one moment. I'm going to bring up the article right here. Let me fix this screen right fast. All right, so let's go to the top. This is the brother in jail. This is the brother who Michael in the hospital after getting shot in the mouth. All right, so shot in the mouth. On Wednesday, Michael was released from intensive care. Yeah, Eddie Terrell Parker was the other man who was with Michael getting tortured by the 6 white police officers out there in Rankin County, Mississippi. The lawyer who you just heard spoke He's a very famous lawyer. I believe he may be with the Nation of Islam, which is amazing, which is a good thing. I love those brothers in the nation. His name is Malik Shabazz, out of D.C. And it said for 90 minutes, deputy exercise that Shabazz called intimidation and unjust torture of Jenkins and Parker. The men are punched, kicked, slapped, and tasered while handcuffed. And they had guns pointed at them while threatening with death. And another thing I mentioned in my last video, I mentioned how when police officers shoot black men, they still handcuff them, even if they're dead. Now, that's psychological. That a dead person is still a threat to you. That's some sort of innate subconscious fear. It makes absolutely no sense that you would have to handcuff someone after you shot them dead. And so for these 6 police officers to not only outnumber them, outgun these men, and have to do this while they're handcuffed is the height of cowardice. To outnumber someone, to outgun them, outsize them, and you still have to handcuff them to beat them is the lowest of the low. These people aren't police officers. These people are terrorists. And it is the system that gave them the right, or feel like they have the right, to do these sorts of things by not issuing punishments when they're done. For decades, police officers have been beating and shooting black people and getting off on it. And when you're like a child, when you're not punished for bad behavior, it becomes more of a habit. You begin to believe that the behavior is okay. And so for racist people who don't like black people, the best profession to get into would be a police officer. That way you can exercise your hatred and your desire to dominate black people pretty much legally and get away with it. So that's why you see a lot of racist people on white people and white on black violence in the police coming from the police officer. The FBI did a study saying that the police officers in America have been infiltrated by white supremacist organizations, and nothing has been done to correct that. Nothing has been done to weed out those sorts of individuals. They still working, and now they're torturing black men, waterboarding, and using terrorist tactics against them, and shooting them in the mouth. There's another video by the attorney. I cut the first one off because it stopped in the middle of him saying something, but I'm going to finish that. He was starting to go into giving the directions to a march or a rally that they were having, but it cut off. So I got the second part of the video. I'm going to share that with you. I honestly haven't heard the second part of the video myself. I've been mainly just reading the articles, but so we can watch that together. Here's part 2. Let me enlarge this. Let me see right here. I put myself right there. And let's go.
And had to have his tongue removed from his mouth. Now, Michael and his family are decent folks. Black Lawyers for Justice and myself will be at the University of Mississippi Medical Center Wednesday, February 13th in Jackson, Mississippi at 3 p.m. to announce strong legal action in this case. We demand that all the officers who shot and tried to kill Michael be charged with attempted murder and aggravated assault. We demand all officers who participated in this be charged with murder and conspiracy and criminal civil rights violations. We demand the body camera footage now. We want all the reports now. We have a devastating civil rights lawsuit against the county and all of these officers in their individual and official capacity. The lawsuit is imminent. Justice for Michael Jenkins. Justice for Brother Terrell. We'll see you Wednesday in Mississippi on behalf of Michael Jenkins, on behalf of Black Lawyers for Justice.
All right. So there you have it. And so, as the brother said, he and his law offices are bringing a lawsuit against the police officers or the police department responsible for that behavior. And the lawsuit is $90 million, which is a huge amount, definitely deserving. But what people tend to do, they sue for a higher amount, so when they get a lower amount, it's still high. So $90 million, absolutely give them brothers $90 million, and that sister who was the witness. One thing I want to say is that the police officers accused the black men of dating white women. During that entire process, Jenkins and Eddie told them that they don't date white women. They don't have white women. But for whatever reason, in white male society head, there's no such thing as a good, permissible um, relationship between white women and black men. There's no such thing as uh, a relationship where the woman agrees and the white woman agrees and the black man agrees. They see a relationship with a white woman with a black man as rape, regardless of if it's consensual. There's no such thing as consensual interracial relationship when it comes to white men. It's always considered rape. So when they say you're dating white women, you're sleeping with white women, what they're saying is that you rape white women with no proof whatsoever. And I really, really wish that when things like this happen and the police officers are identified by their police department, that they get drug tested and alcohol tested, because a lot of these police officers who does this type of violence seem to be on some sort of drugs. These police officers be high, and so, but you know, they don't, at least they don't release it to the public on the results of these drug tests. I'm telling you, they really need to start drug testing these police officers regularly, especially immediately after these sorts of incidents happen. And I guarantee you that you'll get some alarming fines. Let's see here. Okay. So one thing Jenkins' mother said right here, I'm on this paragraph. Jenkins' mother said that the police said they shot her son close range in the mouth because he displayed a gun. At what point was the gun displayed? When he was handcuffed. So let's say Michael displayed a gun before the entire torturing happened. He was not handcuffed. He showed police he had a gun, and the police was just so able to shoot this man in the mouth at close range without getting shots fired at them. Let's say that happened. Once the gun was out of his hand, he shot in the mouth. You handcuff him and torture him. You didn't handcuff him, call for medical, and then do your search if you had a legitimate search warrant. You handcuff a man who was shot in the mouth and torture him. This whole thing stinks. It's obviously a lie. It doesn't make sense me saying it, and I know it doesn't make sense of you hearing it. But I'm glad that brother is alive. I'm glad that the woman whose house they was over, I'm glad she's okay. And I'm also curious to see what's going to happen with the body camera footage. I'm going to say I have a 70% belief that the body camera footage will not be available. Either they're going to simply refuse to show it to the public because of a case of a state emergency where, you know, they don't want to release such footage that they believe will call a riot or incident, or simply the police officers are going to say the body cameras wasn't working or they weren't turned on. But I'm about 70% sure that that's what's going to happen. They're not going to show that body camera footage whatsoever, and that's fine. It would be nice to have it, but there's a witness. The injuries that these brothers sustained is proof enough, and I just want these officers brought to justice. This has to stop. This isn't right. This is being permitted by our government. The United States government is giving leeway and permission for these white supremacist officers not only to get into the police departments with their past, but to do terrorist acts against black people. There was a study recently, I forget what county it was, that was it? I think it was somewhere up in Pennsylvania or Pittsburgh or something. They changed their policy on hiring police. They said that they would no longer hire police officers unless they do a thorough psychological testing. So there, let's say 100% of the people who apply, 100% of them were psychologically tested to see if they were mentally capable of being a police officer. And the study found that 70% of those had to be turned down because they were not mentally capable to hold the duty of being a police officer effectively. It didn't say the majority of the reasons why, but that just leads me to believe that it's a lot of police officers out here who are not psychologically capable and able to be should not be police officers. It's pretty obvious when on a daily occasion you have police killing, beating, torturing, waterboarding black men and women and children. But like I said, ladies and gentlemen, you stay safe out there. One thing I want to tell you: when you are in contact with the police, it's not because you have done something bad. It's not because of you being a coward, but it just gives justification so if something does go left, you'll have this saying on your side and these actions on your side to get a better outcome. Don't fuss, don't fight, don't flee. I'm Scott. This is No Name Media, and I'm out.